I've shared my screen. Able to.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So the last lecture, what we have discussed that how to overcome the name dependence or to eliminate the name dependence, that is anti-dependence and output dependence by renaming the register. Then we discussed how to eliminate the intermediate branches, and all these are done to exploit the amount of the parallelism by the processor. Next, we'll discuss the compiler techniques for exposing instruction level parallelism. That is how the compiler is going to help the processor to exploit more instruction level parallelism. Uh, now, you can exploit more parallelism provided you keep the pipeline full. If the pipeline is full and there is no dependency between the instructions, then you can exploit more amount of the parallelism. So the parallelism among the instructions can be exploited by finding unrelated instructions. That means you find the instructions which are not related. That means they are not dependent. Two instructions are not dependent. That means they are unrelated. So you find in the instruction stream, you find all the instructions which are unrelated, so that that can be overlapped overlapped in the execution. Now, to avoid a pipeline stall, the execution of the dependent instruction must be separated from the source instruction by a distance equal to the pipeline latency of the source instruction. That is what he said. Separate the dependent instructions, separate the separate the separate the depend sorry, how it is moving. Oof. It's very deep. So separate the dependent instructions. Now, so what he says, suppose I there is instruction j, and instruction I and j are somehow dependent. They may be there exists a data dependency between instruction I and j. Then he says that you separate the dependent instruction from the source instruction by the pipeline latency of the source instruction. So what he says, suppose the instruction, suppose let's take a load instruction. Now we know that uh, if there exists a load instruction, then the result of the load instruction cannot be immediately used by another instruction. So if the instruction I is a load instruction and there is instruction j which depends on the result of the load instruction, then if you schedule this instruction I and j, the instruction I is a load, instruction j is another instruction that uses the result of the load instruction, then there will be a pipeline stall of one clock cycle. That is what we have seen in the previous lecture, that there will be stall of one cycle. So what is it? Now, if you'll separate out these two instructions, let's say instruction I is my load instruction, and instruction j, between instruction I and instruction j, there will be a one latency delay. So you put another some instructions, some useful instructions between instruction I and j, such that the instruction j is not going to stall. So what the compiler is going to do, the compiler has to figure out that which are the dependent instruction and how the instruction can be scheduled. The instruction can be scheduled such that there will be no stall in the pipeline, or the amount of stall in the pipeline can be reduced. Now we'll take to explain all this. We'll take this example. We'll take this one. This table. We'll take this table. So if you look at this table, there is a instruction. It says that there is instruction producing the result, instruction using the result, and the latency in the clock cycle. That means if you had a floating point ALU operations and another floating point ALU, so my instruction I is a floating point ALU operation and instruction J is a floating point ALU operations, then the result produced by the instruction I can be used only after 3 clock cycles. So if you have instruction J after instruction I and both are floating point ALU instruction, then J will stall for 3 clock cycle, because until the next 3 clock cycle, the no instruction can use the result of the floating point ALU operation. Similarly, for a floating point ALU operations, and the the instruction that uses the result of the floating point is a store double, then the clock cycle to be say it had a latency of 2 clock cycle. So if you schedule these two instruction one after the other, if you had a floating point ALU operation, the next instruction is a store, then there will be a stall of 2 clock cycle. And if it is a load double, and the instruction that will be using the result of this load double is a floating point ALU operations, then the latency is 1 clock cycle. And if it is a load and the instruction that will be using the result of the load is a store instruction, then it is a the latency is 0. That means in the next clock cycle you can use it. Now we'll assume that the integer load is of has a latency of 1 cycle. That is what we have discussed, that there is if there is a low integer load instruction and another instruction that uses the result of the load instruction, the latency is 1 clock cycle. And for integer ALU operations, we know that in a if the in any integer ALU operation by means of forwarding, then we can reduce the latency. So if it is an integer ALU operation and the result of the integer ALU operations can be used by any other instruction with a latency of 0. So this is the latency that we'll assume in all the explanations that we'll consider for scheduling by means of the compiler. Now we'll take this example. And what does this example say? This example says that we are going to add a vector with a scalar. So each element of vector is added with a scalar and it is written back into the same location. So xi plus the scalar s is written back to the xi. Now if you analyze this loop, the loop is parallel. The loop is parallel if you take any iteration of the loop. So we'll say a loop is parallel if 2 iteration of the loop can be overlapped. Then we say say it parallel. That means one iteration can be overlapped with another iteration. Then we call it say the parallel. Look at, and we call 2 instructions the parallel if there is no dependency between 2 instructions. Now, if you look at, let's take the any iteration. Let's take I is let's take 2. So it says x2 is equal to x2 plus the scalar. Now if we take x1, it is x1 plus the scalar. Look at this is another iterations. There is no dependency between these 2 iterations. There is no dependency between the 2 iterations, so we can call it's a loop is parallel. Loop is parallel. Now let's look at the MIPS, the code for this loop. Let's translate this code segment into the MIPS language, and let's see how let's execute the MIPS code. So this is the code. So how this is the code. Now let's look at, so what is xi? This is stored in some memory location, and that has to be loaded into some register. Then this is the scalar. The scalar can be stored in some floating point register. So you add the 2 register and store the result back into the same register. So xi is stored in some register. Scalar is also stored in some, is accessed and stored in some register. Add these 2, store the back in the same register. Then go to the next iteration. So this operation is done. Xi plus S is stored back. So this iteration is complete. Then you go to the next iteration. Now, when you go to the next iterations, so if you look at this is decrementing. So it's a decrement. Then you check whether so you decrement the some register where the register R1 we stored a the address of each of these xi is stored in some register R1. So it's decrementing. So decrement it by 8. So this is because we are assuming that it's a double word. So you look at LD, 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 though these are all double word. So it's a 8 bytes. So decrement it by 8 bytes. So get the next address of the next word. Then you compare R1, the current address, and R2. The R2 is the address of the last iterations that you want to compute. So once that address is not equal, then you loop it. When you go out of the loop, when you all operations are done, then you go out of the loop. So this is what is being how you translate this code, the code piece. So it says that R0 R0 is initialized to the address of X99 X999. So this from where your operation starts, and it's a double word. So starting from 999, you get the next word. So the the 8 bytes, you obtain the 8 bytes. So R1 contains the address of the first 8 bytes of the memory location that to be added up, and the offset is 0. You access it and store it in a floating point register F0. Then the scalar S is stored, is already accessed and stored it in a register F2. So you add this one, store it back in the register F4. So where F4 Xi will be stored in F4, then you need store it back in the same memory location Xi. So it is F4 is written back into the same memory location. Then the memory location is decremented by 8 bytes because you are doing a operation on a double word. Then you compare R1 with R2. So after decrement, you check whether the address, the last byte of last 8 byte of operation is complete or not. If the last 8 byte of operation is complete, then the loop that terminates. Now let's execute this one. Now once you translate this code, translates this piece of code fragment, then you obtain this sequence of instruction. Then let's execute this sequence of instructions and say to complete one iteration of the loop, and how many clock cycle it takes. So this is what we are using. This is the latency that you'll be using. The first is the load instruction, and next is a add instruction. First is the load instruction, next is next is the add instruction. It says it's a load double and a floating point ALU operation. The latency is 1, so there will be one stall. Stall is 1. So the clock cycle 2, there will be stall can result, one stall will be there. So we're writing the, let's say, one stall here, the clock cycle 2. Then add. Now add, next instruction the add and the store. Now if you look at the floating point operation, this is a add is a floating point ALU operation, and the next instruction is a store. So there is the stall of 2 cycles. So here there is a stall of 2 cycles between add and the store. Then between this the store and add, there will be no stall, but between add and the branch not equal to 1, as branch not equal to, there is a stall of 1 cycle. So the branch not equal, this is if let's look at why this is a stall. Now what he says that it uses the register R1 in the branch not equal to, This is the integer. Look at, this is a integer operation. This is a integer operation. R1, 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 R1. So R1, R2, and here is R1, R2. So R reflects that it is an integer operation, and F says that it is a floating point operation. This is how the nomenclature of register is being done. So this is a integer operations. Then when this operation completes, so these operations completes in the execution stage. Now this is a branch instructions. So branch instructions is complete in the instruction decode stage. Now when this instruction is the instruction decode stage, this instruction is the in the execution stage. So this needs a value of R1, which is still not being produced by the this is a add on-site immediate. See, U for on-site, I for immediate. This is add instruction. D stands for it's a double word. So it's still not being produced. So it takes a one clock cycle. So there a stall is going to take place. So in the next clock cycle, you can forward it to the the instruction decode stage can read it and perform the operation. Now, if you look at to complete one iteration of the loop, it takes 9 clock cycle. Now, can this be reduced by scheduling the code by the compiler? Now, is it possible? Now when you schedule the code, that means you are going to rearrange, and the rearrangement will be done. Sometimes it can be done dynamically by the hardware, and it can be done by the software by means of the compiler. And we are looking at only the compiler technology, how the scheduling of this instruction can be done now by the compiler technology. Now let's look at, there is a, look at, in any case the data dependency has to be preserved. So if two instructions are data dependent, then you cannot change the order of the execution of the instruction. Now if you look at the two instructions, load instruction and add instructions, they are data dependent. So add instruction executes only after the load instruction executes. Now add instruction and the store instruction, these two are also data dependent. So you cannot change the order of execution. Now, if you look at the add unsigned integer and the branch not equal to, these two, these are also data dependent. So that order has to change. But the only instruction, look at this add instruction, is not dependent on the store instruction, nor it is dependent on the add instruction. So I can move the add instructions, and I can move it and execute after the load instruction. So you can schedule this instruction. Now once you schedule these instructions, then you may have to make some modifications to the offset. And you can schedule this the compiler can schedule these instructions because the schedule instruction is not going to affect the result. So let's schedule this instruction. Now let's schedule this one. So let's look at the load instructions. The first instruction executes, then the add instructions, which was there which were there before the branch not equal to, it is moved and executed after the load instruction. And add instruction, no change. Between the add and the store instruction, there is tool stall because there is a data dependence. And let's look at the store here. Now if you look at the previous, where it is stored, it is stored the 0 R1. That means whatever is there in the value of register R1, you add the offset 0. Now when you schedule this one, the R1 is already become R1 is equal to R1 minus 8. It is already decreased by 8. So when it is decreased by 8, then you need to increase the offset by 8. So here the offset becomes 8. So R1, so earlier it was R1, the content of the register R1 plus 0. Now the content of the register is now R1 minus 8. So you add 8 to this. So it is become R1 plus 0. So no change before and after the code scheduling. The no change is going to take place. So you store it in the same memory location. So the store F4 to the memory location, and between add and the store there are two stall. And you cannot avoid this two stall here. And between the in the previous there was a stall between the add and the branch not equal to. Now there will be no stall. No stall between no stall exists now. Now this executes in how many clock cycle? This 3, 4, 7 clock cycle. So on schedule, the on schedule versions it takes a 9 iteration to complete and sorry 9 clock cycle to complete one iterations, and the schedule versions it takes 7 clock cycle to complete one iteration. Now if I'll unroll the loop, suppose this is one loop. Now you unroll the loop, make a multiple copies of the loop. Now when you make a multiple copies of the loop, then the more amount of parallelism can be exploited across the loop. The- now we are exploiting the parallelism within the one iteration loop. Whatever is the parallelism exists within the iteration loop, that we are going to do. Now if you unroll the loop and you can schedule it, then the more parallelism can be exploited. So let's unroll the loop and schedule it. Now the loop unrolling, it increases the number of instructions relative to the branch overhead. So let's look at what is the branch overhead. Now if you look at the previous one, how many clock cycle it takes? It takes 9 clock cycle. But how many instructions is actually executing? It executing only the 3 instructions. These are 3 useful instructions: load, add, and store. These are the only 3 useful instructions. And this add and the branch not equal to, this is also a branch overhead. So here also the same thing. The branch overhead is the add and branch not equal to 0. So in this case, it takes 7 clock cycle to execute. Or there are it takes only this takes the schedule version takes 7 clock cycle to execute. Of these 7 clock cycles, there are two overheads plus 2 stalls. So it take 4 clock cycle. The 4 clock cycle is overhead. Now of this 4 clock cycle is overhead. Of the 7 clock cycle, the 4 clock cycle is overhead, and actual instructions is taking 3 clock cycle. Only 3 instructions are there, useful instruction: the load, add, and the store. These are only 3 useful instructions, and the rest are overhead, which also includes 2 stall. Now if you unroll the loop for a multiple number of times, then the overhead can be reduced. Now once you reduce the overhead, then the more amount of parallelism can be exploited. So let's try to unroll the loop to reduce the overhead now. The loop unrolling increases the number of instruction relative to the branch and overhead instruction. So in previous case, there are only 3 useful instructions, 4 are overhead instruction in a total of 7 instructions. So now we want to increase the number of these useful instructions relative to the branch and overhead instruction by loop unrolling. Now, what you do in loop unrolling? The unrolling it replicates the loop body. Unrolling replicates the loop body multiple times, adjusting the loop terminating condition. So what he says, you unroll the loop, unfold the loop multiple times. Then when you are unfolding the loops multiple times, then the terminating condition of the loop it also be the change. Now let's unroll the same loop. Let's unroll it, and we unrolling by a factor of 4. Now, when you say we are unrolling by a factor of 4, we are unrolling the loop 4 times. And this is unrolling by 4 times by assuming the number of elements is divisible by 4. So there is a mechanism how to do a loop unrolling. And when you discuss about something called strip mining, then we'll discuss how the unrolling can be done. And when you unroll it and eliminate the unnecessary condition, let's look at the original one. Let's look at the original instructions on schedule. Now, if I'll unroll this one, now I'll replicate this one 4 times. So how many instructions are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if I'll replicate by 4 times, then I will get 20 instructions, one repeats, all instructions repeated. Now, if you look at these 2 instructions are actually overhead instruction. Now, if you are replicating it, then you need to remove this overhead instruction. Now, when you remove this overhead instruction, then you need to also readjust the terminating condition. Now, let's look at in the first iterations, it says load F0, 0 R1. Now, when you go to the second iterations, then what was the value of R1? The R1 value is R1 is equal to R1 minus 8. Now, when I will replicate this loop in the second iteration, this should be load F0. Then look at the value of R1 has changed. Value of R1 is changed by the add unsigned immediate, but this instruction will remove. And this will take only when it enter into the loop. The loop overhead will be checked only when it enter into the loop. So this has to be the value of R1 has to be decremented by 8. So this has to be minus offset has to be minus 8 R1. In the next iteration, it should be minus sorry in the so when you unroll this one, this is the first iteration. Sorry, they unroll it in 4 times. So the first unroll. This is the second unroll. When you make a third unroll, it should be 16. When you make the fourth unroll, it should be minus 24. So this has to be readjusted. So let's look at the code. So this is the code. So look at load, add, and store. And in the first iteration, we are dropping these 2 instructions. Then load, add, and store. So load in this after the first iteration, R1 was decremented by minus 8. R1 is decremented by minus 8 before entering to the loop. So we have made it the minus 8 R1. Again, you drop this one. This is third unloop unroll. So it is minus 24. So this is fourth unroll. It's minus 28. Now when it's minus 28, that means the next iterations, the in the next time when it goes to the next iterations, the value of R1 should be R1 minus 32. So every time we are decrementing by it. So when you go to the next iteration, you decrement by 8 bytes and you go. So it says this is decrement by 8 bytes, then branch not equal to R1 or R2, then you loop. So this is how you decrement it. Now let's look at the registers that was being used. In the previous case, you are using the number of registers used are fixed. So here F0, F4 and F2. F0, F4, F2, they are the floating point register, and R1 and R2 are 2 integer register. The integer register we are not going to change, but let's look at the floating point register. And in the original loop, the number of floating point registers we used was F0, F0, F2 and F4. 3 floating point registers were used in the original. Now, if you look at when you unroll loop, then you cannot use F0 here. You cannot use F0. In that case, there exists a output dependence. When there exists an output dependence, then you cannot exploit the amount of instruction level parallelism. So you have to do a register renaming. So we have renamed this register F6. This was writing to the F4, so you cannot use another F4. So we have used F8. Then this is F10, F11, F16 and F14. So if you look at how many number of live registers used, so the number of live register use is much more in this unroll loop than the original loop. And if we'll execute this loop, execute the way the code is written, then this will execute in 27 clock cycle. Now look at, there is a load followed by an add instructions. So there is a stall here, and add and this store, there is a stall of another 2 clock cycle. So all this will add up, that will take you to 27 the clock cycle. Now let's let's schedule this code. So the one iteration, the if I execute this one, the one iteration of the execute this loop, this will take a 27 clock cycle, and this 27 clock cycle is taking to uh, for the loop unroll 4 times. So it 27 divided by 4, so it takes around 6.75 clock cycle per element of an iteration. So we have unrolled it to 4 times. So the 27 clock cycle is taking for these 4 iterations, unrolled for up to 4 iterations. So it takes around 6.75 clock cycles. Now, can this be scheduled? Can this instruction be scheduled such that the number of clock cycles to execute within a one loop of this unrolled body can be reduced? So let's schedule this one. Let's look at the dependency. The add instruction is dependent on the load instruction. Then the store instruction is dependent on the this add instruction. So look at here, there is a dependency. So here also this add instruction is depend on this load, store is depend on this add. So same is the case here, same is the case here. Now if you look at all these load instruction, the load instructions are the load instructions, and this load instruction these load instructions are no way dependent. So if you can take all this load instruction and schedule, let's take. So I have put all this load instruction, no problem. After this load instruction, you can execute this add instructions, and after this add instruction, you execute the store instruction. Then what is going to happen now? So sorry. Now you first execute all the load instructions. No, because none of these because all instructions are independent. So what is it? You find out the independent instructions and overlap the execution of this independent instruction. So all the load instructions are independent. So you execute all the load instruction. Or now then all the add instructions are independent. Now if you look at between the add load and the add, the clocks, there is only a one clock cycle. The difference between this load instruction and the result, the add instruction that the consume the result is a one clock cycle. Now we have put 3 instruction in between. So when this load instruction will produce the result, then this add instruction can consume the result without any stall. Same is the case for this app. Now let's look at the store instruction. Now the store instructions are also independent. So you can put all the store instructions. Let's say you put all store instructions, and let me remove for the timing this add instruction and move it to here. Okay, now if I'll do this one, that means this add instruction I'll put it here, then between this add and this branch there will be a one stall cycle. There will be a stall cycle. To reduce to overcome this stall, so this instruction can be is moved to this. This instruction can be moved here also because it needs one clock, so one stall cycle. And if you have a one intervening store instruction, that can be overcome. In that case, if you put it here, then this offset has to be changed accordingly. So it is moved here. R1 is R1 minus 16. Then R1 has become R1. This look at this was 8 minus 8. The second times minus 8. This is minus 16. So this has to be, in case 2, offset is to be the plus 16. So this is minus 24. So this has become R1 is R1 to R1 has become R1 plus 16. So again, the store has been to 8 R1. So the offset has been the change. So and if you execute the entire instructions, this instruction can execute in 4 clock cycle. Sorry, 14 clock cycle. And how many elements is the 4 iterations here, 4 iterations of the original loop, it executing in 4 clock cycle. So it is 14 divided by 4. So it takes around 3.5 clock cycle. So earlier it was from 6.5. So you reduce to 3.5. So the so by means of scheduling, by means of the code scheduling, that means rearranging the codes such that you can exploit the more amount of so that the processor can exploit more amount of ILP. The by means of the code scheduling, the processor can exploit the more amount of the ILP. Now the question is, we are unrolling the loop, and many times we do not know what is the upper bound on the number of iterations the loop is going to execute. So the unknown number of, you do not know the number of iterations that is going to execute. Most of the time it is unknown. So let's assume that the number of iterations be n. Let's assume that we know that the number of iterations is going to n. Then you unroll the loop to make k copies of the k copies of the loop body. That means you unroll the loop to k times. So that becomes unroll it to k times and readjust the terminating conditions, and that becomes one iteration of the loop. So when you unroll it, it says generate a pair of consecutive loops. That means you create instead of one loop, there will be 2 loops now. So what he says, the first execute n mod k times and his body, that is the original loop. So you had the original body of the loop, and that original body of the loop will execute n mod k times. Then second is the unroll loop, and the loop is unrolled n times, and this loop will execute n divided by k times. Second is the unroll body surrounded by a outer loop that iterates n minus k times. So the original loop is unrolled k times, and that loop will iterate up to n divided by k times, and this mechanism is called something called strip mining. Now, if the value of n is large, for large value of n, most of the execution time will be spent in the unrolled loop body. So most of the time you spend in the unrolled loop body. So the more amount of ILP can be exploited by the processor. The loop level parallelism. So we have given we are exploiting the loop level parallelism, and the loop level parallelism is normally analyzed at the source level, or it's a very close to it. That is, finding parallelism. It involves the recognizing the structures such as loops, error reference, and induction variable, the components. And loop level analysis involves determining what dependence exists among the operands, among the operands in the loop across the iteration of the loop. Look at when exploiting the loop level parallelism. So you have to check what type of dependence that exists among the different iteration of the loop. So you determine whether the data access in the later iterations are dependent on the data access produced in the earlier iterations. Now, if there exists a dependence between the data iterations, then that dependence we call is a loop carrot dependence. So if there exists a loop carrot dependence, that means one iteration of the loop depends on the result of the previous iteration of the loop, then there exists a loop carrot dependence. And if there exists a loop carrot dependence, then the amount of parallelism that can be exploited is going to reduce. So if there exists a loop carrot dependence, it is possible to convert the it is possible to overcome this loop carrot dependence by rearranging the code or modifying the code. Now let's take this example.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Sir, in the previous example, why did you take the loop unrolling factor as 4?
Which one?
Sir, in the example you just discussed,
Right. Right. There,
you took the
so,
unrolling as 4. Sir, why did
so
you do so?
So what I am assuming that my loop will iterate into a number of times that is the integral multiples of 4. So if that is my assumption. So if you say that it is a integral multiple of 8, then you can unroll it to up to 8 times. So you can readjust the terminating conditions. So it's just an assumption. I am assuming that the loop will iterate to some integral multiples of 4. That was the assumption. Okay.
Sir, suppose, yes, sir, actually I had a doubt, like, sir, if the number of iteration is n, there can be multiple factors of n, like there are means there are more than one numbers which can divide the n, sir. Then how can we decide upon the best k, like the loop unrolling factor, which can be the best unroll factor?
Oh, that is another optimization technique. Probably we are not going to discuss on that. That will take into another dimension. But what he says, let's look at the next slide. You look at this slide. So number of iteration is n, and you are telling that loop is going to unroll up to k times. So it's all is done by the compiler, not by the user, right? So the compiler has to do all the job. So the compiler decided that it will iterate up to n to unroll the loop up to k times. Then it does in the two ways. The first that it execute the original loop, the original loop up to n mod k times. Then there is another loop that is unroll loop, and that is being unrolled up to k times. The k times the loop is unrolled, the overheads are being removed, intermediate overheads, and taken only at the end of the loop, and this loop iterates up to n by k times. And this technique, this says, uses a mechanism called strip mining, and this is being widely used. So strip mining is technique that's widely used by the compiler for loop unrolling. So these the k values are sometimes inbuilt into the system. Okay.
Okay. Yes, sir.
So let's take the this case. Now let's look at this. Uh, Now if you look at this one, and there exists a dependence between two uses of xi. Here xi is read, here xi is written. So at one point you read the value of xi and you write the value of xi, and those read and write are done in the same iteration of the loop. In the same iteration of the loop, the value of xi is read and the value of xi is written, not in the different iteration of the loop. So there is no dependency between xi and xi because they are read and written in the same iteration. Now the dependence between successive use of I in the different iteration. Look at this is used. I is used in every iteration. That means I is used in iteration 1, so I is used in iteration 2. So there is a I is used in the different iteration of the loop, and this I is a index variable. So even if they are used in the different iteration, we will not call it a loop carrot dependence. So this loop has no loop carrot dependence. So any dependence that exists is within the same iteration of the loop, and the index variable, though the index variables are used in the different iteration, that will not a loop carried dependence. So let's take this loop, and what are the dependence among the statement S1 and S2 in the loop? So is there any dependence between S1 and S2 in the loop? There is, if you look at, there is a data dependence. Now there exists a data dependence, but this dependence is not a loop carried dependence. Is there any loop carried dependence? Let's see the next slide. Is there any loop carried dependence here? There is within the loop, in the loop there is a data dependence, but if there is a loop, in there is any loop carried dependence, look at, let me repeat what is a loop carried dependence. That means one iteration of the loop depends on the previous iteration of the loop. So if we have a variable that depends on the result of the previous variable, then we call if a variable used in one iteration depends on the result of the previous iteration, so there is a loop carried dependence. Is there a loop carried dependence here? So let's to know this one, you use I is equal to 1. So if I is, let's look at the first iteration. So it is A2 is equal to A1 plus C1, and B2 is equal to, it's very difficult to write today, B1 plus A2. This is when I is 1. So let's take when I is 2. So when I is 2, so it is A3 is equal to A2 plus, sorry, C2, then this was A3. So this is when I is 2, so this is B3 is equal to B2 plus, sorry, A3. Oh, so there's problem with some writing. So let's now with this, you please tell me, someone can explain me, is there any loop carried dependence? I have analyzed for 2 loops, and it's enough to analyze the loop carried dependence. So is there any loop carried dependence?
Yes, sir, because A2 is using in
Right.
third iteration.
Yes. If you look at in the second iteration, I am using A2, and the value of A2 is produced in the previous iteration. So there is a loop carried dependence on A. Then there is a loop carried dependence on B. So if you look at, I am using here B2, the B2 is produced in the previous iteration. So there is a loop carried dependence. Now, if there exists a loop carried dependence, then you cannot make the loop as a parallel. So you need to figure out the mechanism how to overcome this loop carried dependence if the loop has to be make the parallel. So let's analyze this one. So what are the data dependence between S1 and S2? Is this loop a parallel? If not, if not, so how to make it a parallel? So how to make it a parallel? Then I will discuss. But you answer the, someone can answer the first 2 questions. What are the data dependence between S1 and S2? Is there any data dependence between S1 and S2?
Sir, we are using. No data dependent.
No, sir.
Hence,
There is no data dependence between S1. Between S1 and S2, there is no data dependence, right? So is the loop a parallel? Hello?
loop carrier B and Bi plus 1.
I
Carried in parallel.
Hello? Can anyone answer? There exists a loop carrier dependence.
No, sir.
Yes, sir. There exists.
There exists a write two iterations. Look at, first thing is to write one. I takes the value of 1 and I takes the value of 2. There are two iterations and you check. There exists a loop carrier dependence. Can you just tell me where is dependence?
Sir, CI is used in the next iteration of
CI
BI
is
plus
look,
1. Yes.
CI has nothing to do. CI is completely independent. It
Sir,
does not
S1
write.
and
B.
Sir,
Yes,
there
CI.
is
Sir,
no
B of I
no
and
loop carrier
B
dependence.
I plus 1.
Right. So if you look at you compute in if you take let's look at the B1. I is 1. So here is B2. Then this is one iteration. Let's say A1, B2. In the next iteration, it is A2. A2 uses B2. And B2 is computed in the previous iteration. So there is a loop carrier dependence. Loop carrier dependence from S1 to from S2 to S1. So this was S2, and in the next iteration there is a it goes to S1. So there exists a loop carrier dependence. If such dependence exists, then how to make this loop parallel? Now let's look at this one. If you look at the statement S1 and S2 are independent. S1 is independent of S2. Absolutely correct, right? So if S1 is independent
sir.
of S2, then I can execute a S2 followed by S1. No problem. If two statements are independent, they can be executed in any order without affecting the result. So it's not going to affect the result. So let's change S2 and S1. Now, if you change S2 and S1, then what I am going to get? I am going to get B. Sorry, this B I plus 1 CI DI, and this is AI is equal to AI and BI. Okay. Now let's take I is equal to, let's take what is A1. This is I is 1. So A1 is A1 plus B1. A1 is equal to A1 plus B1. Now if if I is equal to 1, if I'll compute the I is equal to 1. Let's say if I'll compute I is equal to 1 before this, I can compute this I is equal to 1. This is independent. This is a independent. A A1 is equal to A1 plus B1. Then if I can check this one, change the loop AI plus 1. And this also I'll change is a I plus 1. This also I'll change it a I plus 1. So I'll slightly uh, change the loop. First, I'll change the order of the statement execution. And I'll slightly rewrite the statement. So there is no dependency from S1 to S2. So interchanging the two statement is not going to affect the result. Now on the first iteration of the loop, the statement S1 depends on the value of the B1 computed prior to the initiation of the loop. So let me change this one. So what I did, this was the original loop. Then I computed A1 is equal to A1 plus B1. This is done. Then taken I is equal to 1. So I have computed Bi plus 1 is Ci Di is does not change. Then Ai plus 1 is Ai plus 1 and Bi plus 1. So it is Ai. So it is Ai, Bi. So if it is Aia plus 1, it is if it is Ai plus 1, this should be Ai plus 1. This is also Bi plus 1. So the index is changed here. And the last iterations is B101 is equal to C100 and D100. The last for computing the B. So B100, C10. This I has been changed to 99. So it computes B100, and but in the original loop you have to compute B101. So so B101 is C100 and D100. So this is the new loop, transport loop. So if I'll transport this loop, then whatever the dependency that was exist, the loop carrier dependency was exist in the previous loop, then we have removed the loop carrier dependency here. Once once you remove the loop carrier dependency, then you can exploit the more amount of instruction level parallelism in the loop. So this is how some of the dependencies can be you can transport the loop from given a loop, then we can transport to another form and remove the loop carrier dependency. But it's already time 9:57, so you can leave the team and join for the next class.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, in the below one, where there is no loop carrier dependency, sir, isn't there any dependency from statement 1 to statement 2? Like in statement 1, bi plus 1 is getting updated, and in second statement, we are using it as a source input.
No, I could not get your last part.
Sir, I'm saying in the last example, like the down code part, sir, there is not there any
This one
data
or
dependence.
no, this one, or I have to go to the previous one.
No, sir. In this slide only, sir.
Right.
When in the latest example, you said there is
This
no.
one? This one?
Yes, sir.
Now
Yes,
let's
sir.
look at. Now if you look at, I am looking at the one address. Look at what does if I'll convert this one. So this you are telling this is a read and write. You have to read and you have to write. So there is a read and write. So read and write within the same iteration. So whatever is the dependency that exists in the same iteration, that will exist. But we are looking at whether one iteration is dependent on the other. So we are unrolling the loop. So if there is do not, so how do you explore this one? So there is the loop is now parallel. So because the loop is parallel, you unroll the loop and you execute it. So whatever the dependency exists within the iterations, that will exist only. But among the iterations, there is no more dependence.
No, sir. Actually,
Okay,
what
sir.
I
So
think,
then,
even I had a similar doubts. Actually, sir, in the transform loop, we have introduced a data dependency from which did not exist in the previous loop.
Right?
Like b of I plus 1 is we are computing and we are using it in the
Right.
second time,
Right.
but that was not existing in the previous one.
But in
That
the,
is what
that's correct. Your
noticed.
observation is correct. But in the previous case, you cannot unroll the loop. So if you cannot unroll the loop, you cannot exploit the more amount of parallelism. Now there exists a data dependence, but the data dependence exists within the same iteration, and by means of scheduling, I can overcome this data dependence. If
Yes,
I'll
yes, I got it, sir. Yes,
right,
because that second will be coming after, always
right.
be after the first one.
So
That's why.
once
Yes,
we have looked at one of the code that all the load has taken at one place, then we add, then the store. So when the compiler can unfold the loop many times, so there are many independent instructions it will find, and you can put this independent schedule the independent instructions such that the stall will be minimized. Okay.
Yeah, okay, sir.
So then can we say like we can use any independent statements to cater for the interloop or intra-loop dependency stalls?
Yeah, yes, actually when these schedules, it looking for only independent statements. It will looking only for independent statements, and you rearrange the independent statements such that the stall is minimizing.
Okay, sir. Got it, sir.